Hello, everyone, and welcome to our ACE 26 conference presentation. Our title for today is ACErs and A.C.E.s, Fostering Resilience in Catholic Education. My name is Pete Johnson, and I teach middle school social studies and religion in San Jose.
Hi there. My name is Austin Sanders. I teach middle school ELA and religion in Santa Ana, California.
My name is Catherine Olohan, and I teach middle school ELA in New Orleans, Louisiana.
My name is Joseph Kelley. I teach high school religion, social studies, and math in Louisville, Kentucky.
And my name is Kelley Koerwer, and I teach middle school language arts, religion, and technology in Tulsa, Oklahoma.
So our research began with recognizing that educators focus on the ability for students to be successful in the classroom as well as the real world. This focus of educators is on giving students the ability to overcome challenges. We also recognize that students face trauma of various kinds throughout their development and into their adult lives. Teachers, therefore, are constantly modifying their teaching practices in order to help students find success in the classroom and beyond. There are many reasons to be optimistic in this research and in this presentation. For one, we found that there's a large difference between the number of students who face trauma in adolescence and those who show bad behavior later in life. Educators must recognize this ability of students to overcome challenges and modify their teaching practices in order to promote it further. So what will we focus on today? Adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs. These are related to the trauma or maltreatment that many students face, as well as its effects. We'll also discuss resilience of adolescence. What does it mean to show resilience, and how can educators recognize and promote this in their classroom? Lastly, we will provide teaching practices and recommendations for ACE teachers and discuss how Catholic educators are best suited to foster resilience in their students.
So what are ACEs? These are potentially traumatic events that occur in childhood, so that phase of 0 to 17 years. There are several categories. There's physical abuse, emotional abuse, sexual abuse, violence against the mother, substance abuse, mental illness, and incarceration among members in an individual's household. These are very common. The CDC reports that 61% of adults surveyed across 25 states reported experiencing at least one kind of ACE. Around 1 in 6 reported experiencing 4 or more. These have long-standing effects throughout a child's lifetime, as can be seen in the graphic below. So this traces a child's development from birth to death, and shows the relationship between early childhood trauma and health and well-being problems later in life. So at the bottom of the pyramid, you can see that we have adverse childhood experiences. This leads up to social, emotional, and cognitive impairment, then adoption of health risk behaviors, then disease, disability, and social problems, leading up eventually to early death. Systemic racism, poverty, and sexism can all add on to the impact of ACEs. These are related to chronic health problems, heart disease, cancer, diabetes, mental health issues, and many other issues such as depression, anxiety, suicide, substance misuse, STIs, and teen pregnancy. So as Catholic school teachers, we have a lot of ways that we can help the student. This is essentially important for us because we model ourselves after Christ the teacher. So we are called to serve the whole child. Part of serving the whole child is preparing them for when they leave us, as well as looking at the circumstances that shape them. So some CDC recommended practices to prevent ACEs: strengthen economic support for families, promote social norms, protective against violence, strong start for kids, good child care, good schools, teaching skills, social emotional learning, healthy, safe dating skills, parenting skills, connecting youth to caring adults, mentoring programs, after-school programs, interventions, victim-centered services, treatment. So as you can see, these do not fit into the academics as we might normally see academics. But if we're going to shape the child and build this resilience, these are practices that we need to implement as teachers.
So while we might not be able to, at a school or classroom level, prevent ACEs, we can foster resilience. And the definition of resilience that we're going to use focuses on the successful adaptation of students in the face of these adverse childhood experiences. So anything that children are naturally doing or learning to do in order to overcome the detrimental effects of these adverse childhood experiences. And the working definition we're going to stick with is from Yeager and Dweck because it situates it within a classroom. So any behavioral, attributional, or emotional response to an academic or social challenge. So these adverse childhood experiences, how is it impacting the classroom? How is it impacting their academic development? And how can we foster strategies that allow them to successfully adapt to the situation that they are in? So we're going to start thinking about what we can do at the classroom level and at the school level.
Now that we better understand ACEs and resilience, what do these mean for us specifically as educators? The good news is teachers and schools can promote resilience in students. There is hope. In terms of school-wide actions, social emotional learning is rather effective, so giving students the tools to deal with anything life may throw their way. Also, our next few slides are going to discuss strategies within the classroom, such as goal setting, mentoring students, teaching social skills and virtues, creating a safe environment, and flexible mindsets. Just keep in mind that fostering resilience comes from people's actions as well as the environments they're in.
So now looking at specific methods teachers and schools can employ to build resilience. The first one we're going to discuss is goal setting, and then empowering our students to actually follow through with those goals through action plans. We will discuss this further, but an important prerequisite for goal setting is establishing a malleable theory of personality within our students. This is particularly important for students with adverse childhood experiences. Building the mindset that they can grow, that they're not something that they've just labeled themselves to be. And so an important way to build this is by teaching our students how to set goals. And it's important that we teach students to set realistic goals and give positive feedback throughout the process. The best goal setting plans can be described through the acronym SMART. So we want to give our students specific goals that they set for themselves, goals that can be measured both by the teacher and by the student, goals that are active, that actually involve things that students can do that make progress towards a goal. Again, goals should be realistic, they should be reachable, and they should occur on a timeline. Now, goal setting is useful in both the cognitive and behavioral realms. So an example of cognitive goals could be creating an action plan for the SAT. That is the example through which Yeager and Dweck did their research on goal setting. Another one might be preparing for an academic speech, or even something smaller for our students with A.C.E.s. More on the behavioral side, a good example is it's totally reasonable to help these students build a plan and set goals for how they will confront a bully. And one last note, this is something that can be scaffolded. Smaller, lower stakes goals ought to be set for students so that they get used to the process before they actually set goals for things that might be higher stakes and might be more difficult for them to achieve.
Another resilience method that we talked about in this presentation is the idea of mentoring students. As discussed in some of the scholarly articles that we reviewed, positive relationships with competent adults are shown to mitigate many of the negative effects of A.C.E.s. This includes after-school programs, mentorship opportunities, and close relationships with competent adults, to name a few examples. Speaking with Catholic schools and Catholic educators, this can involve mentorships in the faith community as well that can also help mitigate the negative effects of A.C.E.s. Mentorships can be explicit or can occur through common, meaningful interactions with the students. Simply showing students that you care, showing up at sporting and extracurricular events, asking them meaningful questions, and having good conversations throughout the day are helpful ways to building this mentoring relationship with your students.
So building on this idea of mentorship is the fact that when students watch teachers, we are modeling the behaviors that they will later imitate. So to combat adverse childhood experiences and promote resilience, we should teach these skills explicitly as well as modeling them implicitly. So again, these behaviors that we tolerate in the classroom are also the behaviors that we are teaching them implicitly are okay. The behaviors that we model, the way that we hold ourselves, the way that we respond to certain situations, these are all behaviors that we are teaching them and social skills that we are teaching them. And even if we are incredible role models, it's still our duty to explicitly teach them. So as Catholic school teachers, we also need to teach these explicitly, remembering that Jesus spoke in parables, but also gave explicit instruction to his disciples in the ways in which they should behave. So how can we do this as teachers while balancing content? There's many ways that we can teach social skills in particular. We can include them in procedures. Sentence stems are one very easy way to set the tone for how students should speak in our classroom. How do we disagree with someone? How do we agree with someone? How do we build on a conversation? You set the behavior expectations for your classroom, giving the students a leg up by having them learn skills they'll need in the real world. We run scenarios with hypothetical situations to introduce topics in the same way that we use bell work questions to provoke discussions. We can have social skills of the day. What to do when someone says no, how to greet an adult, how to thank someone. As Catholic schools, we can also have the virtue of the day. This can be drawn from the day's lesson, or students can practice their writing skills while explaining how to implement a virtue in their daily life. You can also have students practice their public speaking by presenting on a social skill or virtue they think deserves more attention. We can also teach academic virtues and skills. So some basic skills might be study skills. Students can learn how to take notes. They can learn how to use flashcards. But also students should learn that struggle is not a bad thing and hard is not impossible. We can teach this explicitly through encouraging students to struggle with material, emphasizing to them grit, perseverance. These are all skills that as educators, it's important that we ingrain in the students because we do have them for 8-9 hours of every day.
So the fourth method we're going to discuss kind of stems from the social skills, and that's creating a safe environment for discussion. Students need to feel a sense of security and a feeling that they can authentically express themselves and define their identity within the classroom through discussion. Creating this sense of security in the school environment, in the classroom, helps mitigate a lot of the adverse effects of A.C.E.s. So what strategies can we as educators execute in our classrooms to make sure that this can happen on a consistent basis? One of the first strategies that we can implement is accountable talk strategies. So again, modeling and explicitly teaching students how to have respectful conversation with one another, to incorporate their peers' thoughts and opinions into their own formation of ideas and perceptions about the world and about themselves. We can also have organized communication outlets. Students should feel comfortable communicating with you and communicating with their peers and doing so honestly. And having organized systems in which they can do so and explicitly asking them to do so normalizes this behavior so that they can do it confidently and do it on a consistent basis. Ask students to talk about themselves. Importantly, we should understand confidentiality guidelines, but for the most part, teachers can be confidants for students when they don't feel like they can express themselves authentically in other environments. And one of the last things we can do to create this safe environment for discussion is establish a democratic classroom. Invite students into the process of creating classroom rules and expectations. If they feel like they have agency in establishing those principles, then that sense of agency can extend to the rest of their academic environment. If they feel that they have had a hand in establishing the rules and regulations, then they feel like they are safe in this environment that they have created. Importantly, we need to elevate student voice so that it is equivalent or nearly to that of the instructors. They should feel like their opinion is heard and is taken into account by the instructor as well as the peers in their classroom. All three of these strategies help create a sense of security for students that they may not be experiencing in other environments. So if we implement accountable talk strategies and organized communication outlets in a democratic classroom, then students can feel like they can express themselves authentically. And importantly, you have agency as the instructor in establishing such an environment.
Our next method is encouraging flexible mindsets, particularly with academic ability and social attributes. So a study by Jaeger and Dweck emphasizes mindsets as having the potential to enhance resilience among students. They discuss two mindsets. The first is entity mindset, which is fixed. In terms of intelligence, it's very much so you have it or you don't. And students, when faced with adversity, have a tendency to give up. So by saying, oh, I'm just not a math person, if they're struggling with a math concept. Whereas incremental mindset is flexible and focuses on the possibility for change among personality traits. And in terms of intelligence, it focuses on growth and development over time. Students, when faced with adversity, put in the effort. So when Jaeger and Dweck studied the effects of interventions to increase incremental mindsets in students, they saw that explicitly teaching students about incremental mindsets helped students take on a similar mindset and increased academic and social performance. Basically, GPAs rose over time and teachers reported positive changes in students' social interactions and classroom behavior. So incremental mindsets lead to resilience, and they work best when both the teacher and the student adopt an incremental mindset. So if a student perceives a teacher as having an incremental mindset, like receiving praise for a job well done by the teacher saying, oh, you did really well on this, I can tell you put in a lot of effort, instead of you did really well on this, you must be smart, that'll lead students to adopting an incremental mindset. Overall, there are benefits to students' performance academically and socially, even when the overall environment doesn't change. If the student's mindset change, they're able to make positive changes, even when the environment, they're still dealing with ACEs at home.
So we began this presentation noting the many reasons for optimism when helping students with adverse childhood experiences become their best selves. But we're going to close it by noting why we as Catholic school teachers can be particularly optimistic. And so we've discussed the Catholic school advantage, and we noted that the Catholic school advantage is certainly at play when dealing with students with ACEs, but we want to look at the specific ways why this is the case. And so we already noted a few ways in which interventions in Catholic schools are more beneficial. Pete mentioned the ability for Catholic school teachers to mentor students. Catherine mentioned teaching virtues. A few other things that exist on more of a school-wide level are things like self-discipline, religious context, and the ability for Catholic schools to implement meaningful curriculum for our students. So these are things that teachers can employ on a school-wide level. And the sort of culture surrounding these three things is particularly beneficial for these students. So the fact that we can teach students Judeo-Christian values, things like humility and kindness, tolerance, and even just the fact that we can teach them about Jesus, their creator who created them and loves them. The benefits of this are enormous. The ability to shape curriculum to meet our students' needs, particularly their social emotional needs. So for example, including something like a service requirement in a Catholic high school, that's particularly beneficial for a student who might have never gotten that leadership opportunity or that opportunity to serve. And generally just the ability to teach students to control themselves, to practice self-discipline that's more common in Catholic schools. That sort of culture that exists in our Catholic schools gives teachers more leverage in the classroom, particularly when putting these interventions into place. So that concludes our presentation. We thank you for coming to watch us today, and we look forward to any questions you might have.
Thanks, everyone.